I'm doing good. I am doing good. Just got done with a workout, so I am dead right now.
I can imagine.
If you guys have seen me in person, you know I'm not the biggest person in the world. So trying to do something to change that. Trying to do something.
It gets harder the older you get.
Hey, that's the thing. You know, I'm 40 years old now, as of June. So I don't think I've waited too late, but yeah, it's definitely harder. I guess I wise up with age. So it's like, why didn't I do this? 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I probably should be working out myself, but that's good that you're doing it.
Hey, put it this way: who knows what's going to happen when football season starts? I have all these good intentions, but I know how busy that time of year gets. So I hope I can keep it up.
Yeah, once some tailgates start, you might not be any more working out.
That's the thing. I need it. I'll need it then more than ever. So that is it. That is it for sure. So. All right, I figured get together. Been a little bit vacations and all that kind of stuff happening, so kind of back settled down a little bit now. When SEC media days last week, so we kind of can turn the page a little bit from recruiting. I know we got that barbecue this weekend and all that. We could talk a little bit about that. I kind of wanted this to kind of get together, talk a little bit of pure football again with SEC media days being last week and all the storylines we got from that, and then the order of finish and all SEC players that came out on Friday, and then if we have time and get into it. Also, I was going to bring up. Yeah, you guys know I'm on the Bill King, or some of you know I'm on the Bill King show every Tuesday morning up in Nashville, and they just have peppered me with some pretty good questions lately. I forget the person's name who gives them to Bill, but he has these random questions that he wants to ask all the guests. Bill's got a lot of guests from a lot of teams out there. So of course I do Florida. I think Florida State, Georgia, LSU all have representatives from the media that join Bill's show every week. And I think he's asked this question to most of them. But underrated player, a player that isn't being discussed, but will be by season's end. I went with Cam Jackson. I think they asked for a kind of national narrative on that. So I think we know Cam Jackson. So that's one reason I went with him. And I'm not so sure how much the nation knows. And he's one player I think the nation will know by the end of the year. And then a bubble wrap player, one player that you don't think Florida can do without this year. I didn't want to go quarterback because that's just kind of obvious. I kind of wanted to go away from that. So I shared it in here, but the player I went with was Ricky Pearsall. Just because of the experience in the receiver room is not much besides him as far as proven production. So we can get into that a little bit too. Of course, Kiyaunta Goodwin, unfortunately transferring out for Florida, going back home to Kentucky to take care of his mom, who's dealing with cancer. So well wishes and well thoughts going along there. So we can get into the offensive line talk a little bit as well. So I think we got plenty to talk about here as far as pure football goes off of SEC media days and all those storylines. Right there. So, I think we'll go back to it a little bit. And let's just start the most recent. We'll go to Friday and Florida being picked fifth in the SEC East. I don't think it was the huge surprise, but man, it still stings to see that. Being the Gator fans that we are, we don't want to. While as realistic as it could be, and maybe in some instances, we'll see what the season holds for us. But it still stings seeing our Gators thought about in that manner. So hopefully they can go. Buck the trend and of all these picks right here, of all the preseason magazines and websites out there, and now the media putting it out there as well. And then also only 3 Gators selected in the All-SEC team, and they're all third team with Trevor Etienne, Princely Umami Yellen, and Jason Marshall. So I think that's the most recent one. I think we can start with. Did any of you guys expect Florida to maybe be higher than fifth? I don't think we could have. I don't think we could have expected Florida to be any higher than third. I wouldn't have been completely shocked if Florida was third, fourth, or fifth. I think we can all see the reason Florida is in that 3-team race with South Carolina, Kentucky. South Carolina, Kentucky, and then Florida behind those two. But it wasn't surprised they were fifth, but I wouldn't have been surprised if they were fourth or third either.
Well, I'll definitely say that it's been abundantly clear since the beginning of the offseason started that the national media, the SEC network, no one thinks highly of the Florida Gators. And even to a certain extent, I don't know if I see a lot of faith in Billy Napier from the national media. Us as Gator fans, we have faith in him. But I don't necessarily see that in the national media, though, either.
Yeah, I kind of agree. You guys, I know you guys know I had Braden Gall on from Athlon, and currently I agree with you. I do think a lot of people think he can figure it out, and I don't know if a lot of people out there think he can get it to a national title level. I don't get that narrative. I think you're right about that, Coach Guns. But I love the name, by the way. But yeah, like I do. There is the narrative out there, I think, from the national that Florida needs to be patient. I do think they like Napier long term. Now, I don't know if they like Napier long term national title wise, but I do think going into this year, they don't think he's a miracle worker. They don't think Florida's going to go out there and win 8-9 games. They don't. They expect Florida to not be the surprise team. When you hear surprise team in the SEC, Florida's name's not really brought up. It's always Kentucky's name brought up. Even South Carolina this year, Arkansas's name is being brought up a good bit in that regard. You're not the teams Florida's around, and the teams Florida's kind of grouped with in these preseason division listings. All the other teams are picked as sleeper teams and surprise teams. You're right. You're not hearing Florida as that sleeper or surprise. And I don't know what that is. Is it maybe not a belief in Napier, a year or two away? Like I said, I think most of the narrative is that they like him long term, but not much there this year.
You know what I think it is too is I think Anthony Richardson didn't do him any favors being drafted so high, because if you're not close to the program like we are and follow the program every day, all you see from the outside is Anthony Richardson was drafted in the top 5 and Billy Napier couldn't win with a top 5 quarterback. They didn't see or know like we do that, Anthony had his issues. He was a young quarterback and there was a maturation process he had to go through. All the national media sees is, oh, Billy couldn't win with a top 5 quarterback. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, that is certainly out there, and something we heard a lot of coming out of the draft. A lot of rival fan bases wanted to throw that in the face. Yeah, how does Napier only win 6 games with the number 4 pick? So yeah, you're right. Not following it as close as we do. That's the easy target that I think that's thrown out there. What about some other players that maybe you guys expected to maybe be named all SEC? I didn't do this in the episode on Friday because I kind of had planned on doing this chat over the weekend of getting, I can throw some other names out there I think probably could have been added to the all SEC. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts and see who you think could be on there. I don't want to take all the thunder, but I will say Austin Barber was the name I thought could sneak in along the offensive line. No, he's not a well-known name outside of Gainesville there, but what he was able to do last year and coming in right there along the offensive line, I was thinking probably a third team for him if he was going to be put on there. I didn't think much higher than that. He was one player. I think maybe even by season's end, we probably could see his name on there if we were looking at offense. But he was a name I wouldn't have been surprised to see right there on third team. But the guys mentioned Montreal Johnson, of course. And I did mention this in the episode the other day. I would have been fine with him or ETN. I think ETN as a freshman just kind of flashed, and he has the ETN name to him. So a lot of people are familiar with his brother as well. And they saw what he did as a freshman when stats were pretty similar to what Montreal Johnson was able to put up last year as well. So Montreal Johnson and Austin Barber on the offensive side of the ball, where I would not have been surprised, and I probably would have listed on had I had a vote this year.
I don't believe that Mizuka was on him because that would be the that'd be the guy I would go with. I mean, if he can stay healthy, I feel like he's going to have a good year.
Yeah, I don't know how that was, I guess, the part I missed being in Nashville and being around the SEC media as maybe some of the other buzz players. If he would have been one to be in the transfer, but him missing spring probably didn't do any favors there either. But I can't tell you how many SEC media members probably even knew. Probably first that he transferred to Florida, second of all that he missed spring pretty much. So, but yeah, he was pretty lauded what he was able to do at Baylor, and then maybe how he even fits into this offense. Kind of a tailor-made offense for his play style. So yeah, he would have been a name too. I wouldn't have been shocked had it been on there.
I don't think we should necessarily be surprised that there aren't many names on the all-conference because, I mean, if we think about it, it's not like this team is full of stars. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's just a bunch of average guys, especially where they project us to be.
I want to go back and find the list. Let's see. Calls. I mean, one more. I was maybe a little surprised Pearsall wasn't maybe like third team as well. If I go to third team offense,
I think that's just because I don't think they highly of Mertz. That's why.
Yeah, there you go. Good point. Really, really good point. Honestly, but then when I go and look at who they had, Anaya Smith, Texas A&M, and Jermaine Burton, Alabama, I can't really argue with that. Or you also got Brew McCoy, Tennessee, Ja'Cory Brooks at Bama. Second team, Antoine Wells from South Carolina. That was the second team. First team was Malik Neighbors and Ladd McConkey. So, based off of who they actually put on there, I can't really argue all that much. But then you're right too. There's not a lot of high thoughts in Mertz as well. So probably limit Ricky Pearsall in that regard and probably penalize him in that regard as well. But I'm not even so sure now, given, if I would have looked through the list and started listing, I don't think I would have put Pearsall above those, at least going into the season, I wouldn't have put him above those guys really either. But good thought for Princely and Marshall and ETN there. I'm hoping. I think by season's end, are there any players that you guys maybe expect? And I guess kind of goes into one of the topics I talked about, I've kind of discussed on the Bill King show last week. Underrated player or player that isn't being discussed that will be discussed by season's end. I think I probably did steal some thunder by putting Cam Jackson on the list, but I do think there are a few others. But if there are some, I want to let you guys, probably get in on that one. You can drive that conversation a little bit of guys you expect maybe to be all SEC by the time the season's in.
I could definitely see Marcus Burke being having a big year. I know we mentioned on some other chats that we've had, but I feel like he's finally got his head right and is going to have a pretty solid year. I could see him having 500 or 600 yards receiving this year.
Yeah, the thing with him, I guess, was our conversation at Pearsall is, what happens with quarterback. I mean, it's going to be so Graham Mertz dependent. And look, I know it's not set in stone what the staff wants to say, but I think we all agree it's probably Graham Mertz. Hey, that's one more storyline we can go into too, while we maybe marry some talk here. Napier coming out last week at SEC Media Days and say, hey, we're not going to wait long to name a starter for quarterback. And look, that was music to my ears. That was the question I asked him when he was here in town, when he was with the Clay County Gator Club. And I asked him, would there be a timeline for the quarterback? And he made it sound like there would be, that they didn't really want to drag it on, that they were going to let him compete in the spring, not really seeing a name for the starter in the springtime. But I did get the vibe that it wasn't going to take long in the fall, and that's pretty much admitted that he's just not going to let that drag on too much. And I expect by that first scrimmage we'll get get our name starter there with Mertz. But hopefully that's all coming along, and he gets a repertoire with those freshman receivers and somebody like Marcus Burke, and sounds like him and Ricky Pearsall have garnered a pretty good relationship so far in this offseason. So I think we're all excited for the potential of some of these wide receivers, but going to be so dependent on that quarterback.
I'm on the Gators roster right now, and it says Graham Mertz is a redshirt junior.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It is.
So we could see him for the next 2 years, possibly.
Yes, correct. We could see him this year. We could see him next year. And that was a conversation we were having the other day. I forgot where it was. I think it was in here in the Discord. I forget what day it was. But what would that mean? There are so many ways you could look at that. So let's just start with maybe best case scenario. He has a good year that Florida gets 8 wins. Just say 8 wins. What does that mean for Graham Mertz? Well, I think that means he probably had an okay season. Probably not NFL good season. So he comes back next year. I think that's probably best case scenario. He has a good enough season this year where Florida wins 8 games and you can see a bright spot. Now, if he goes out there and has an excellent year, I think Florida can win 8-9 games. I would go that far. If by the end of the year we say he had an excellent year, to me that translates to 8 or 9 wins. I really do think that. But you get that top 8 win, tops or 8 wins, then I think there's a scenario he comes back next year and maybe looks to build on that, or he stinks it up, and he's definitely not good enough to go to the NFL. I'm not sure he transfers again. I guess he could be a grad transfer and go transfer somewhere else, and go try his luck somewhere else, but. It makes it very interesting for some storylines next year. With Lagway coming in as a true freshman, if it's a so-so kind of year, do you bring in another transfer quarterback so you don't have to throw Lagway to the wolves? You're not completely sold on what Graham Mertz did in 2023. It brings up some interesting scenarios, but I think there's a plausible scenario where he is back as the basically to your point, he's the quarterback this year and he's the quarterback next year for Florida.
As much as I would love to see Lagway next year, I don't believe Billy will intentionally start Lagway next year unless he's somehow some generational talent. Even if Graham Mertz somehow shits the bed, I think he will bring in a transfer quarterback, in my opinion.
I say the more arms, the better. I mean, unless, he goes out there and he has a great year and for whatever reason he comes back. I mean, I don't know. It's the top of the quarterback draft this year is pretty darn good. Now, if he goes out there and blows it up, maybe he can make a name for himself with the schedule Florida has this year. And if he goes out there and plays well, maybe he can insert his name in that group. I don't see it at all. But could he have somewhat of a good year where he is thinking about the draft and he goes into that second tier of quarterbacks? Is that enough? Has he had enough of college football? Can he see the next step at Florida where he can get better, make the team better? Year 3 and Billy Napier. I mean, there's a lot of ways that I think you can go with Graham Mertz being initially when he was brought in. I said it was 1 year. I said he's either going to have a good enough year to go to the NFL, or he's going to have a bad enough year where you don't want him back next year. But the closer we get, I can see a scenario where he plays just okay, mainly because of this offense. I mean, this offense isn't going to ask him to do a lot. He's not going to throw the ball 40 times a game unless Florida's just down for whatever reason a whole bunch and it has to throw the ball 40 times. But I think Florida's style of play and the style of play that they play the opponents, that I don't think there's going to be many runaways for Florida or the opponent that they're playing. So Florida's going to be in a lot of these games. So he's not going to throw the ball 40 times. And I think the style of play is just not going to lend itself to where he's going to go out there and throw for a crazy amount of yards and turn heads and all that. So I do think I keep talking to myself. There is really a plausible scenario where he plays just good enough where you'll want him back next year, and it will probably be better if he's back next year.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I saw it, but I seen it was either on the Discord or it was on Twitter that somebody was saying comparing Mertz to have like a year like Jackson Dart had with Ole Miss, and just like, because Jackson really didn't have to make many plays and he just relied on the run game. And I kind of feel like that's a good comparison, to compare the two, because if we could just rely on the running game and he just make throws here and there, I still feel like we could win 7 or 8 games.
I'm glad you brought up that, because everybody wants to, crown Lane Kiffin, and, if something happens to Napier, maybe Lane Kiffin can be head coach and all that. Go look at that Ole Miss offense last year. I mean, you think Napier like running the ball? Go look at some of those Ole Miss rushing numbers. You have what you play with what you have. So. But
tell you what,
yeah,
super excited for this team because everyone has written these guys off, obviously with the exception of us. Super excited for these guys to show the world.
I mean, that was the vibe I got from those guys in Nashville last week. I talked about that on the episode last week. You could tell there was that there was that vibe about him. And then Napier basically coming out and saying, we're not going to let the media, we're not going to let outside perspectives drive the narratives of this team. So we can think what we want to think about this team. You can think what you want to think about this team, but we're going to put our heads down and go to work. And you could, I mean, of course you expect, that's what media day is a bit. You expect the players to, say we're going to shock the world, we're going to surprise people and all that. But, that was at least the vibe that they were sending out there.
What did all like everybody in the group and like yourself included, yourself included, Dave, think of like Napier's quiet confidence he had, like as far as, and his SEC media days and everything, because he just, I mean, the players, I know there's a lot of changes in the SEC, but I mean, they seemed a lot, more confident than a lot of the other SEC teams. To me, just listening to him, he just was glowing, in the SEC media days about how excited he was for the team.
Yeah, I forgot where it was. I was listening to an interview with Napier, and it wasn't on any of the main stages. I believe it was 1010 here in Jacksonville. And I think there was the quote where he said, "People don't know what I know." And that really stuck out because that's not really like Napier. And I hope it wasn't tongue-in-cheek. I hope it wasn't, quote-unquote, I guess fake is maybe the word to put in there. He doesn't come across to me. Now, that doesn't mean Florida's going to go out there and win 8-9 games. That's not what I mean by that. And it's not me saying he put on a brave face by saying that and Florida goes out and wins, 6 games this year. But I do think with that comment, I do think he probably has some more confidence than what we discussed here so far. The SEC media, maybe even some of the fan base out there of, what this team can be. Now, of course, a lot can change. You got to go through a fall camp, and I don't want to, rely on injuries or anything, but that can happen. Other teams out there are trying just as hard as Florida. Florida's not the only team that feels disrespected. Florida's not the only team that thinks they feel good at this moment in time. But I think it was a surprise for me just to hear Napier come across that way.
I mean, he sees these guys in practice. So, I mean, he obviously sees more than us. But I will say this. I mean, even if it maybe isn't the talent that excites him, maybe it's just the culture that he's building.
Yeah.
And him just saying the guy's work is what excites him.
Right. That just crossed my mind. It could be just this is another moment for him to go to Nashville in front of media, in front of his own players and all that to kind of, rally his team a little bit, speak good about his team, maybe build, some confidence in some ways. Don't get me wrong. Everything matters when, there's 60 minutes you're on the field. You go out there and get punched in the mouth. We've all heard that saying before, and things change, So all the preparation and stuff, for the next 4 or 5 weeks going into that Utah game, that's where what they did in Nashville last week ain't really going to matter in the end. But I still think it's nice to hear some confidence, nice to be surprised maybe by some confidence, but you hope that translates into what this team's going to put together the next 4 or 5 weeks in preparation for the season.
Yeah, I mean, the consensus opinion is that the offensive line is going to be nothing to write home about, and I think that's what's driving a lot of the 6-6 and even worse predictions. But Napier made a big bet on Rob Sale, And I think part of his confidence is if guys start coming through like Robert Hunt, Dodson, Max Mitchell at Louisiana. I mean, because that's the thing that I think we could all be wrong about. If the offensive line is elite, if it's truly elite this year, then all of our thinking about the team is probably wrong. Those of us who are skeptical.
Right. That unit, and I hate to put so much on one unit, but the way this team is constructed right now, you're right. That can be that can be it. That can be the difference in this team. And I think we know. I won't say no. I think we expect this defense to be better, and I think that will keep Florida in some of these games, and it will keep the games close. But it's going to be this offensive line. It's going to be some coaching decisions that really, I think, make the difference in this team. I think this defense can be good enough to say, all right, Florida, you're 6-6. All right, now offensive line, now running game, now coaching decisions. There's your 7th win. There's your 8th win. There's your possible 9th win. If you want to go along with that, I do think this defense can be good enough to get Florida to 6-6. But as kind of what Ojo was saying right there is, all right, now if this offensive line can start producing the talent that those names he named that were at Louisiana that are now in the NFL, you get that type of play from and development from Coach Sale, and to go along with that, you hope that compounds the wins and kind of upsets the narrative for this Gator team.
I mean, I don't really feel that bad about the left side of the line. It's the right side is really the ones that's kind of got me wondering, because I don't know what direction we're going to go for the right side. But the left side was, Barber and Bazooka, and I don't feel too bad about Kingsley either. I feel like Kingsley's had his moments where he's played well. So I mean, it's just the right sides. I feel like it's going to be the side we're going to be questioning the whole year.
Well, Richie Leonard, he played good last year, so I just don't know about our tackle situation at the right tackle.
That's where I'm going to go now, especially with Goodwin and the news last week, the unfortunate news that he's transferring out. And now it looks like on the right side, I mean, do you pencil in Damian George? I think you might have been penciling him in there before anyway, but now Lindell Hudson comes in after spring, and he's got a whole lot of starts under his belt. I'm eager to see that too. I don't think Hudson came in to sit behind George. I don't think, but apparently, the staff likes George. There was some, praise from him from Nick Saban last week, and Cole Kublik. I think they were together when that came out, saying how good of a athlete he is. But I think we're still waiting for that. At least at Alabama, it didn't translate on anywhere of a consistent basis where he could stay on the field. They took him off the field. He was benched there by Alabama. So for Nick Saban, I mean, look, that could have been lip service from Nick Saban. Nick Saban's not going to talk bad about some a player right there at SEC media days, but I don't think he's going to blow smoke either at the same time. So I don't know how to take that comment by Nick Saban about Damian George, but there's something to work with. You hope that experience that he has at Alabama. You hope we talked about offensive line coaching and development that they get something there. But I'm eager to see where this puts. Not so sure Goodwin was starting this year anyway. I think even with the high recruit, profile that he had, I'm not sure he was the guy this year. I think he could have been developed into being the guy after this year. But now I'm interested to see what happens with Hudson and George at right tackle, and if Hudson can come in and take all those snaps that he had at his previous stops to come in and start at Florida. That is the biggest question still, was the question we had coming out of spring. Feel better about the left side. You hope Mizuka can come, and sounds like the timeline. Billy Napier told us last week in Nashville that timeline for him seems to be good, where he'll be probably playing game one, maybe limited when fall camp starts. He's not a full go when fall camp starts, but can do enough, I would think, to get back in the rotation a bit, where you figure out that left side. But, Kingsley maybe elevating his play from last year. I want to see what Barber can do with all the starting reps at left tackle in the spring, in this fall camp that he necessarily didn't get last year. And then, we still got those questions on the right side. But that Hudson-George battle, if it's going to be a battle, I would expect it to be with Hudson's snap count. But I don't know. That is the biggest question right there on the right side.
Well, either way, I feel like Hudson and George will both play. I think that I maybe George is just not good enough to start at Alabama, but he's good enough to start at Florida though. That's kind of in my outlook about George. Maybe it's just like he's a guy that's needing a few more years of seasoning to be a Bama starter, but he's ready right away to start at Florida.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think Ocho's getting ready to hop in here too. And I know he could probably say this, but you guys maybe hop in too. When Tarquin came back last year, didn't him and Barber kind of split a bit? There wasn't really did it change game to game, or were they just kind of rotating in at that right side?
Yeah, they definitely were rotating in. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's the main reason why Tarquin transferred, because it's like he had to split reps, because I felt like he should have been the starter there, since he had started so many games.
Ocho, are you gonna hop in there? I saw the mic.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say with George. I mean, he's you could see why the staff took him. He's big. He's long armed. He has the NFL measurables. He's strong as an ox. Like the reason why I was so adamant about I thought he was a guard is like he is a road grading run blocker for sure. So you worry like kick and slide. Like he just seems a little bit athletically limited. Quicker edge rushers can get around him. But what I'm starting to warm to is Odom is such a plus blocker at tight end, especially for a young guy. You feel it even has room to get better. If you pair him on that side, it takes a little bit of the threat of the edge rushers away. And then if you're looking at, kind of a 3 technique or even 5s coming over and playing off of George's shoulder, I like those matchups actually. So for as much as I don't like him as a prototypical tackle, I think in this offense it could make sense.
It's a good point.
And I guess that's probably one position we're looking for. Maybe a surprise player would be the tight end position, right? I expect Odom to play. I like what I saw from him last year in some of those roles, and then Boardingham being more the playmaker, hopefully in that position. We'll see if he can come along. And we haven't seen it yet, and being able to kind of come back around and maybe come back around from spring where it sounds like he turned some heads. And by the time Florida goes to play Utah, he's just one of those, weapons Utah did not expect, because Florida didn't use him last year. He was hurt last year. And something that you unearth in spring, fall camp that you, can get ready where that you can kind of surprise Utah with, and hopefully the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, I feel like, if we could just use Boardingham as kind of like the H-back type guy, which I'm sure that's what we're going to use him, is more what Zipper was, and use like Odom in the red zone. I'm not sure when he's going to be healthy or not, but it seems like, the few the touchdowns he caught, the very few of them were in the red zone. I feel like that'd be kind of go 2 tight end or something, and use Boardingham as more as a, H-back.
I think so. I think that I would imagine that's the fault. I was trying to go back and look while we were talking about this. I remember Rob Sale. I'm pretty sure he was talking about Damian George, but what position they brought him into, and then I think it was changing during spring practice. But I thought he had a quote about, we brought him in as a tackle or guard. I can't remember what position he said, and we plan on keeping him there. But then I think it changed at some point during the spring.
Yeah, Sale's story was that he was always a tackle. He was always going to stay a tackle. But, I'm not saying he's lying. It's a lot easier to say that based on the low tackle rotation we have now. If we had brought in some of those other tackles, either Simmons or some of the more acclaimed veteran guys, the story might have been different.
Yep, you're right. There it is. It said, on whether Damian George is playing inside or outside, he'll stay outside for us. We've got inside guys, but right now, obviously, we've signed him for a tackle, and we need depth there as well, so he'll stay out there. But we got some really, really good young inside guys we're really happy with. So there you go. Yep. Because I knew there was a specific quote about that. I had to go through the notes and find it. You guys should see like my episode notes, by the way. It's just like it even takes forever to load up now because there's just so much there. I gotta start a new one. I need to probably before this season starts in about a month or so. I'll be starting a new season note. Most of us, like
Got you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, most of us just like quotes from coaches, and especially in the springtime, and this is the only time we get to hear from the assistant coaches. So I try to keep that stuff to get easily found when I want to go back for stuff like that. But then there's just most of it's in notes and stuff. It's kind of ridiculous. So when I go back and look at it, maybe when I'm old and decrepit one day, that's how the book would be written.
Hey, Dave, I got a question.
Yeah.
So regarding Kamari Wilson, I saw his weight go up a lot, and I heard there were some rumors in the offseason that he might make that transition to linebacker. Have we heard anything regarding him?
I haven't as far as a position change. That's a good question. Yeah, he did. That weight gain was there. I would assume it was done purposefully. I do think it is a Moton Miguel Mitchell safety combo right now. That's where I'd lean. If Kamari Wilson wants to be a Gator, does that mean he will make the move to linebacker? We'll see. I think from what I can gather, that's where they see his future. Like if he maybe even wants a future, that's probably where it should be. But at the same time, I don't know what he thinks about that. I know we all heard the transfer rumors in the spring, and maybe based on that, and then Moton coming in late, you didn't really have the opportunity to. But right now, I'd say it starts Moton Mitchell, and I don't know what that means for him. I'll still leave that. I haven't heard anything about a position change, and unless somebody else in here has.
I mean, just to give some context on how big that is, like they listed him as 220, and Cam Chancellor is like 99th percentile for the NFL Combine as like a huge safety. He was 230 pounds at the Combine, and he's 3 inches taller than Kamari. So if they're trying to put weight on him, I don't think it's to stay at safety.
I think he's personally going to transfer out by the end of the season, especially with all these talented linebackers coming in this cycle, assuming we keep all of them.
Good point.
Yeah. I think the writing may be on the wall for him if he's looking for playing time.
And the staff really likes Robinson from the last class, and I know he maybe glossed over him as a freshman. He had a really good spring, and the staff is pretty high on him and what he was able to do. Now he got some playing time in. Florida was beat up at linebacker a little bit in the springtime, so he probably got a little more playing time than he normally would have as a true freshman. But he made the most of that opportunity in the spring. So James Robinson out of Columbia. From what I can gather, they were impressed with what they saw from him. So, yeah, you add him to what Florida's doing at linebacker now, and, yeah, maybe that plays into it a little bit.
I just find it funny that if you remember all those little clips that the Gator football team was posting on their little Twitter account, half of them was of Austin Armstrong yelling at Kamari during practice, which I thought was funny.
I hope it all works out for him. He was Napier's first big recruit. I think it would, granted, whatever happens. I think it would be cool to say the first big recruit turned into something at Florida under Napier. If it doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and say that's any doom scenario for Billy Napier or anything like that. But it would just be a nice story if you could say that first big, quote unquote steal of his first, his transition class turned out to being an impactful player for the Gators.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kirby and Nick Saban, they sign guys like Kamari who turn out to be busts pretty much every year.
Right.
But we just noticed it because we only got one 5-star guy. They get, 4 or 5 of them in the secondary some years.
Right. We put so much on that one because it was like, yeah, Napier come in and he got one over Kirby right away. And we're still, this will probably be the year we get our answer what Kamari Wilson's going to be at Florida.
Well,
good.
Well, regardless of whether I feel like Kamari was going to be good or not, I still feel like we needed a veteran like R.J. Moten.
Oh yeah,
because I feel like that. Kamari had his moments where he played okay last year, but then he had other moments where it's just like, oh God, dude, what were you doing? So it was good that just to reiterate, I think it was good that we brought in R.J. Moten. I don't think he's going to be like all SEC or nothing, but I think he'll do a solid job. And it's like even if Kamari plays a little bit at safety or they move him to linebacker, it's still nice that we brought in R.J. Moten.
Look, he was still part of a pretty good Michigan defense the last couple of years. Played a lot of football. I know late last season it didn't go too well for him. They take him out, and the TCU game, Michigan couldn't do much right. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's because Moten was on the sideline. They took him out, and he was the linchpin in that defense. So TCU went crazy on that defense. No, he's not that guy. But he was still part of a good defense there, and I'd like to see how he translates. And there was some talk of they didn't know really where to play him. And hey, look, we're kind of talking about that with Kamari right now, but there was some talk, maybe them trying to make him a linebacker at Michigan as well, and that maybe didn't sit right with him. So he was maybe stuck between a rock and a hard place there at Michigan, and maybe it was just time to move on to get a fresh start at Florida. And hey, he's at least going to be serviceable. I have a hard time saying he's going to come in and be some god awful player.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
No, I was just in agreement with you, Dave. I just feel like he's going to be decent. I don't and that would be a huge upgrade from what we've had the past couple of years. If he could just be okay, I think that would be a home run at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's actually my guy on defense that I would call a dark horse All-SEC candidate, because it'd be pretty easy to rack up a bunch of picks with his coverage skills, his range. I could easily see him having a 5-pick season.
Ocho, how would you maybe translate his game and maybe what Corey Raymond taking over? Is there any kind of correlation there where that might take off?
Yeah, look, I'm an idiot. I don't know anything more than Jim Harbaugh, but I think Corey Raymond might. So the good news is his cover skills are elite. Like, you watch it on film, it checks out. You look at the stats. He doesn't give up air yards. So if you're going to have him as a rangy safety covering, really typically the field side, he makes a lot of sense there. So why Michigan didn't see that, who knows? Like, they know stuff we don't know. But yeah, so he makes sense to me there. The thing about it is, if you look at why he was benched, it was 2 specific games that he really flashed weaknesses tackling in space. And the 2 guys were Sam Laporta for Iowa, who I don't know what safety's tackling that guy. There's going to be NFL safeties who struggle to tackle that guy next year. And then the other one was, I can't remember his last name, Charlie from Purdue, the speedy slot receiver. And it's like, okay, he's also a 3rd-round pick. Like, you got to take what you can get from these college guys. To expect them to be elite in coverage, open field tacklers, there just aren't that many guys like that. So if you gave me the choice between an A-plus cover guy or an A-plus tackler at safety, give me the cover guy.
And for what we've seen at safety the last few years, give me somebody who's at least going to get a good angle. Give me somebody who can communicate. So it's yeah. The move was absolutely needed. Yeah, I think he had to go get somebody like that. I'm glad they went there and got somebody who's got a ton of experience and experience in a good defense. Who knows how to win as well the last couple of years. All right, guys, if you can bubble wrap a player, who you bubble wrapping? Who can Florida not Don't go quarterback. Who can Florida not go without this year?
Princely.
Princely.
Cam Jackson.
Ooh. Cam. I like both of those.
With the lack of depth at the outside edge rusher, I don't know if we have another guy that could step in and be anywhere close as productive. At least what we're projecting Princely to be.
That's a good point. That was the way I thought about Pearsall on offense, but I do think we probably like the potential there of some of the young receivers and some of the receivers who have been around. But, I think we were probably a little more confident in them breaking out more so than, and not to say anything bad about him, but, Pyburn being so young and breaking out, or, relying on a TJ Searcy as a true freshman. I went with Pearsall because of that reason on offense and the receiver, but you might be right there with Princely. There's it's very little behind him. there really is. I'd be worried if he went down to, who is going to rush the quarterback.
Who's going to set the edge, Dave?
Yeah. I mean, this wouldn't be a bubble wrap player, but this was maybe the underrated that we could be discussing by season's end. I'm looking at a Justice Boone type. He's not getting talked about anywhere, and I'm eager to see how Florida being deeper up front, being able to play guys more in position, not having to shuffle so much, what that means for all the players along the defensive line. But almost kind of somebody who may be undersung a little bit, and that's somebody like Justice Boone.
Yeah, I'd love to see Justice Boone play the edge position. If Princely needs a blow or something, I'd love to. With how big he is and how physical he is, I'd love to see him play a little bit of edge. If Princely needs a blow.
Yeah, I think they'll move some guys around too. I could see Nunnery coming in and playing edge in certain situations. I do think Scooby will be that guy every now and then as well. I don't think it'll be, Princely's out, so it's automatically Pyburn or Searcy. I think you'll see some of those linebackers drop down and be that edge guy as well. So some of those guys staying on the field a bit more. But Nunnery, Robinson, the linebacker I mentioned earlier, could maybe fit in that role. Oh, you guys still got me?
Oh yeah, we're still here.
Good, because on my recording, I lost my camera. I don't know what happened there, but and I'm back. There we go. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, I mean, I think. And speaking of Princely, there's that interview with him. I hope you guys have listened to it. If you're Plus members, you've had it early. It will be out for everybody else later on. But really good interview with him. But somebody I'm excited to see. But yeah, I don't think it's totally set in stone. Okay, all you have is Pyburn and Searcy behind him. Now I'm eager to see what those guys can do. But I think there's some other guys that have a little bit more experience as well. That can maybe fill in at the same time.
Princely's got a great personality, by the way.
Yeah, he really does. You never know what you're getting with these players sometimes. When some of them are really cool. Like Jason Marshall, he was straight to the point last week at SEC Media Days. You weren't getting much out of him. So sometimes those guys, I won't necessarily say freeze up. They're just not talkers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can get the ones that want to explain and go out and extend the conversation a little bit. Now, sometimes that's on the host a little bit. You gotta bring that out of them and get it out of them. And SEC Media Days is certainly a much different format than sitting down and doing a podcast and stuff. I think we could probably, if a podcaster out there like myself or Soderquist, if you can get Jason Marshall, we could probably get a little bit more out of him. But Princely, he still was. He was still bringing it. He was still bringing it. And I really enjoyed it. Just got a text from Will Miles. So, would with summer being, busy and can't really set schedules too much, vacations, and he's got kids and baseball and all that stuff. It's like probably starting next week, and it kind of just times out, of course, with fall camp and all that good stuff. Looks like we'll probably be more back on a normal rotation every week with Will Miles. So
Gator football's coming. Will.
it is.
Drop the family.
I got some other things coming too this fall. Hopefully can announce those things soon. I'll give you guys first dibs of knowing what it is. But got some new things coming along the way. Change the game a little bit.
I'm kind of excited to see what Derek Wingo has in store. If he could have himself a full season of being healthy, I think he could be in for a really big year.
He's definitely ready. I got to hang out with him. When was this? Late May. I was doing some stuff for Florida Victorious with a few players. Him, Montrell Johnson, and Justice Boone. I got to hang out with those three guys for a little bit, and he's just itching to get out there. He feels that way too. He feels there's a lot left that we have not seen because of just some situations. Learning a new position, being injured last year, since his career at Florida, learning a new position, then being injured last year. He's ready to go out there and prove a lot of people wrong as well. So, he's really determined to be that guy, and I hope it translates. I think he gets overlooked a bit because he has been here, and we highly recruited, had those stars behind his name. We're just still kind of waiting. So I'm eager to see it as well.
Well, speaking of edge guys, that like Wingo was the edge in high school. It's like that'd be a guy if they ever decided that they wanted an extra guy. I feel like Wingo, if he could be healthy, be another nice guy to come off the edge too.
Yeah, maybe so. One more topic I want to get to you guys with, and we'll probably call it after this one. But what do you feel about all the talk with Billy Napier and his play calling? Like how long are you willing to give it? Is 2 seasons enough? And I've went into this argument too many times, probably on YouTube for all the comments. Got so many comments about the offense was terrible and blah blah last year, and all that. The offense wasn't terrible. Quit taking everything to the extreme. Wasn't it as good as we wanted it to be? No. Was it as consistent as we wanted it to be? No. But just don't sit here and call it terrible. That's just if you're that ticked off, then your narrative needs to go somewhere else. It wasn't terrible, but is 2 years enough? If it's what we saw last year and maybe what some expect this year. Okay, just say it's average this year. Are you willing to still, are you still like maybe even feel he's the right guy to call plays down the road? Do you hope he gives it up and get somebody else in here? I'm still of the mind that I'm okay with him calling plays if he wants to change it up just because he's the head coach and wants to be more of a CEO role and wants to share some of the responsibility, then I'm all up for it. But I'm also at the same time I'm not ready to see him give it up. I'd like to see what he could do with somebody like a DJ Lagway, but I don't know the timeline for Billy Napier calling plays or not, if it matches up or not.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the interesting part about it is, in my opinion, was Anthony Richardson, because how would I have viewed that same offense if Dan Mullen was calling plays? I think there could have been more success if maybe the play calling and the play style was just a little different. That doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, put full judgment on Napier, but I think it could have been better, even for what it was.
I will not disagree with you. I didn't mean to make it sound like, and you guys know you've listened to me for the last year or so. I didn't mean to make it sound like it was perfect or anything like that. I'm just willing to let it play out a little more, I guess, is probably the best way I can say it.
I mean, excuse me. My thoughts are is like I don't think Billy's like an elite play caller. I think he's like maybe a top 40 play caller, but it's like I don't think he's bad where it's like, oh, we're losing games because of him. But it's like I think he's going back to what you said about if he has an average year calling plays, do you think he should give it up? I think it's like it goes by wins or losses. Like if he's average, and we won 8 games, it's like we don't have kind of nothing but a choice to give him another chance. But I mean, I think he's a good play caller. I just think people are just losing their minds over everything, and it's like there was multiple things we lost games because of it. It wasn't just the offense went flat some games. It was a million different reasons we were losing games last year. Besides the offense.
Yeah, I said it in the episode. 2 things really stick out. If the defense is better, I don't even think it's talked about hardly at all. And we know that we got to do some fixing, we got to do some improvement late first half, early second half. Probably my biggest detractor was coming out of halftime. It just seemed like, well, now it could have been players, it could have been Napier, but it ultimately falls on him either way. But coming out of halftime, I've got to see some improvement there. Now, whether something changes, of course, every coach does this, but I think the narrative and the message from me, and I think we've seen it resonate in recruiting, is adapt and evolve. And I think they did that to a point, and now we need to see that play out on the field this year as well. So we need to see some better time management, better clock management, better play calls, late first half, early second half, and let that not be such a detractor to this Gator team.
I actually think that the offense should be viewed in a prism outside of wins and losses. Something that we've had here between Jim McElwain and the Will Muschamp offenses. At some point, there were some points where we were winning and the offenses were still putrid. I mean, I think regardless of wins or losses, it could be a 6-win season or a 9-win season. I think the offense needs to be judged in its own prism before we decide as a community what should go on with it.
So glad you brought that up, because would we look at Jim McElwain's 2015 offense with Will Grier in the same line if Florida didn't have that defense?
No, probably not.
I mean, that offense was good. Don't get me wrong, but it is lauded because it was better than what we saw under Will Muschamp. We were coming off of a Muschamp year, so any kind of points we were so happy to see. But at the same time, you had that defense that got them the ball so many times, and that offense wasn't lighting the scoreboard on fire.
Well, with that being said, it's like and never in Billy's career was he as bad as what Nussmeier was. I mean, I'll say that,
That is true. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, 2015 was okay. I'm trying to pull it up here.
Bro, Nussmeier wasn't as bad as Nussmeier was at Florida. That's why he got the dang Florida job.
New Mexico State, okay, Florida won 61-13, 382 passing, 224 rushing. Okay. Then East Carolina passing 15-25 for 205, rushing 168. So, okay, it was 373 total yards of offense versus East Carolina. Yeah, 245 total yards versus Kentucky that year. 392 versus Tennessee. Against Ole Miss, you had 355, but we just know how opportunistic that offense was, and the big plays were there. You jumped up early in that game. Will Grier's last game, total offense 337. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you go by total yardage. So I'm saying that offense, because of Will Grier, has some rosy shades on it.
Yeah, it definitely did. But I think y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they average around like 24, 25 points a game when we had Nussmeier at the helm?
I'll look it up right now.
Yeah, 31 points versus. Okay, so it's 61 versus New Mexico State. This is that 2015 year. 31 versus East Carolina, 14 versus Kentucky, 28 versus Tennessee with the Greer to Callaway, 38 versus Ole Miss, 21 versus Missouri. I mean, so you got 28 versus Tennessee that year. That's not bad. 38 versus that Ole Miss team. That really good Ole Miss team was really good. But I think because of Greer to Callaway, and then the very next week beating the brakes off of Ole Miss, I think that offense gets remembered a little better than it really was.
23.2 according to ESPN for the season.
Yeah, that's where I thought it was around there. I thought it was pretty low.
Yeah, it was mostly Treon Harris.
Definitely.
And I still remember not feeling too bad about him. I mean, that his first game was at LSU, remember, and he threw for 271 in his first action, 17 of 32. He was a young quarterback.
I think the real problem is when they brought in their own quarterbacks in year 2, they still averaged 23 points a game. It says that according to ESPN in 2016, they averaged 23.9.
My biggest. They didn't let Treon run enough. There wasn't enough design runs. That was my biggest detractor, my biggest complaint with that offense. They didn't play to Treon Harris enough.
No, he's the type of guy you want to throw 10 times a game, like the way that Muschamp had that where they ran the ball, just about wishbone or whatever is what they should have been doing with Treon Harris. Not he's not a guy that he couldn't even see over the offensive line, and McElwain's wanting to throw the ball with him.
But something for another day, another topic I do want to get into. Can Florida can a freshman receiver be anything like Antonio Callaway in 2015?
Well, you definitely think that Andy Jean would be that guy if it was going to be a guy that that was going to step up and be the guy. You think it'd be Andy Jean with his smooth route running.
I was trying to look it up. Let's see. I mean, the receivers that year, I remember. I just wanted to make sure I got them right. That group was not anything to write home about. So it was ripe for a true freshman to come in. Antonio Callaway, DeMarcus Robinson, and Brandon Powell. Callaway, 35 catches. DeMarcus Robinson, 47 catches. Brandon Powell, 29. So that's 3 guys right there. Nobody else had higher than 6. And that includes Ahmad Fullwood, Valdez Showers, Chris Thompson, of course, and Alvin Bailey with 3.
I know this is unrelated.
And Jake McGee with the tight end with 41, by the way. Go ahead.
Just a little fun fact.
Yeah.
Will Muschamp averaged more points per game in his first 2 seasons than Jim McElwain.
Hey,
I did not expect that stat.
I remember enjoying that 2012 Jeff Driscoll, Jordan Reed, Mike Gillisley offense. Not because they lit the world on fire, but opportunistic, clutch at the end.
Yeah, the way we beat Florida State, so it's like what I liked about that. That was my favorite win that year.
And then it was A&M and Tennessee back-to-back weeks. Jeff Driscoll, he made some heck of a throws in those 2 games.
Yeah, he did.
I go back. I think the most underutilized player in that whole era was Almarius Hines.
Oh yeah, he
was like a burner.
I was like, man, how can you not find a way to get this guy the ball? Because I think it was 2010, Mississippi State came to the Swamp and they had to play him at running back, and he actually did pretty well, but they only gave him the ball 4 times.
Was that the year that Dan Mullen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that had to have been the year Dan Mullen upset us in the
Yep,
Swamp.
that was it. That was the game I was talking about. Yep. Man, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. I need to stop. All right, guys. Go ahead.
I was a big fan of Mary Science.
Do what?
I'm sorry. I was a big fan of Marius Science. I feel like he could have had a big career, but I don't know why they can't, like you said, couldn't figure out how to get the ball in his hands.
Yeah. All right, guys. That was fun. Really good, fun chat. Season right around the corner. I won't decide how I do this. Trying to get some more members in here. I may put this whole chat on YouTube or something. I haven't decided yet, but with the season around the corner, it might be a nice little tease for non-members to get them to hop in here. But all right.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gators Breakdown Plus members. And these chats will be happening more often with the season around the corner. Catch you next time.